All right, everyone, we're back. Happy Sunday. My name is Taylor Nixon, and you are watching Takeaways with Tay, where I provide you with key takeaways from books that I've read so that you don't have to. This was something I started at the beginning of April of this year as a way to connect with like-minded individuals who also like to read nonfiction books, because that's where we focus on books pertaining to self-help, fostering healthy relationships, and what else? Financial literacy, all those things. So far, the ride has been great. I've been getting a lot of feedback about the segment, the show, the broadcast, and also some suggestions about what people are interested in watching or interested in learning more about as far as the books are considered. So I'm still taking suggestions. If you have a book that you would like me to dive into and share my takeaways after I get finished reading, please leave a suggestion in the comment section so that I can do that. I would love to. I love reading, as long as it's nonfiction. And as long as, as long as it's nonfiction, I'll read it. And it just not super long books, because I do have other things to do. But yeah, so this week we're back on regular program schedule. There's a book that I read. It's called Quiet by Susan Cain. And Suzanne, just some background information on her. She's a renowned public speaker, former corporate lawyer, and co-founder of Quiet Revolution. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see that. So the whole entire book, Quiet, right? It is about introverts. And I thought this would be a great topic to bring up, because there's this discussion, there's this debate about introverts versus extroverts, and how one or the other thrives in a situation or doesn't thrive in a situation because of that personality trait. So introverts, right, as we all know, are people who are considered, you could say, shy, although being an introvert doesn't mean that you're shy. But you could say that introverts are the ones who kind of sit in a corner or stand in the corner, and they don't really interact, they don't talk. They might not be the most outgoing, and they kind of stick to themselves. So there's a lot of misconceptions around introverts, and some of them being that introverts are aloof, they lack confidence, they are antisocial, they're disinterested. The list goes on and on and on. They might be considered passive or lack leadership ability because they are considered, I guess you could say, less assertive, or at least the stigma that we give introverts. They're considered less assertive than an extrovert. And, I feel like as a society, I wouldn't necessarily, me personally, I wouldn't put all those labels on an introvert, right? Because you don't know the person. At the end of the day, unless you have a conversation with someone and you can see how they think and get their opinion on the world and different topics, you really can't classify them in the categories that I mentioned earlier as far as being aloof or antisocial and things like that. I think the biggest thing with introverts versus extroverts, especially as I was reading the book, is that there's a difference in the way that the two perceive the world at different times. So extroverts are considered more outgoing, and they prefer more social stimuli, and introverts are considered, they like to stay to themselves. They value their alone time, and they prefer it as opposed to being around people all the time. They need time to recharge. And so I feel I wouldn't necessarily say that you have one person who's on one end of the spectrum and another person that's on the other end, although there are some people like that. But I do feel like when it comes to extroverts and introverts, there's a spectrum that most people fall somewhere along the spectrum. So they might have traits of both extroverts and introverts. The book kind of like plays on this notion that we live in a society that caters or that prefers extroverts over introverts. And I would say that I can see why that is true, right? Because, social media and everything that's going on as far as like, if you have the charisma, you can get my attention, then regardless if you have the substance to sustain my attention, you got my attention. And that's what this society is based off of, kind of like this superficial notion or ego, if you will. And while it's great to be able to like charm people and get their attention in that aspect, I feel like there is a uniqueness to introverts that should be put, or at least be considered and be acknowledged. Because just like extroverts bring something to the table, so do introverts. It just takes a little bit more. I feel like it takes an introvert to open the door for another introvert to bring whatever it is that they had to the table. Extroverts, not to say that they couldn't, but they just oftentimes, I think they are attracted to people who also like to engage and be in social situations and things like that. And these are just my opinion. But my first takeaway from this book is that in America, there is a cultural bias towards extroversion. So just like I said with social media, putting out content and engaging people and getting them to subscribe to your channel, like this, stream that. It's like if you can keep someone's attention, if you can reel them in, if you can be extroverted enough or be outgoing and social enough to get their attention, then you kind of have like an upper hand in society. Because especially like in the world of viral content, the next big thing, wanting to stand out, brands wanting to be associated with what's the most appealing, what's the most attractive, engaging, things like that. And so it doesn't really matter sometimes what you're talking about, it's just how you're talking about it or how many people you're able to engage, which oftentimes puts introverts at a disadvantage, because a lot of times they don't necessarily care to want to have a say in things. That doesn't mean that what they have to say is not important. It just means they simply just don't care to put input into something, or they don't. Sometimes, it takes them like it's the way that they perceive the world that's different. And I think that a balance needs to be established when we're talking about introverts, extroverts, and like, let's say if you're having, if there's a project to be done, having a balance of both would help give different inputs on it and make the project even more successful, in my opinion. But the author Susan Cain talks about how there's this extrovert ideal. So it's an idea which has developed throughout history that extroversion is preferred over introversion. And there are all types of statistics to back this up. One particularly being that 85% of people associate success with extroverted traits like assertiveness and pretty much, yes, assertiveness and social ability. I don't know why I couldn't say that. And a lot of times introverts are undervalued, and that's unfortunate because, like I said, they have so much to bring to the table. It just sometimes takes their environment might need to be different. The conversations might need to be different, but ultimately they have input. They have things to say. It also brings me to think about like just the education system and how oftentimes classrooms when you can say like teaching encourages the extroverted child, because it is more, I would say, for an extroverted child, being in a classroom setting might be more comfortable than versus an introverted child, because an extroverted child likes to speak up, they like to talk, they like to state their opinion and say how they feel. They're not afraid to read in front of everyone. But the introverted child, they might need to be pushed a little bit more, and they might need to be encouraged a little bit more, and incentivized a little bit more to come out of their comfort zone. Because a lot of the times that's really what it is. It's just they're not as comfortable with certain settings as extroverts are. And so of course, making the adjustments necessary to cater more towards introverted children is a suggestion for those who are in public or private settings, that just to improve their social skills, things like that, because those are important. Like, just because you're introverted doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn the skill of being able to speak publicly or connect with people, or like you have to rely on the perfect situation or things like that in order to be able to connect with people. I think that there's a certain amount of social skills that you need just to be successful in life. And I don't think introversion is an excuse to not work on those skills. I just think that there needs to be what do you say, like a little bit more catering to introverted children, introverted workers, people, introverted beings altogether, because they have contributions, and oftentimes their contributions are overlooked because they really don't necessarily speak up, Also, takeaway number 2 is that I believe introversion is a gift. So, just like being extroverted and having charisma and things like that is a way to someone can leverage, things and get in different situations and be successful. I think introversion is a gift just solely because it's all about the way you feel, the way you think. And a lot of times introverts are more sensitive to a lot of things than an extrovert might be. So an introvert might consider how someone else might feel, or consider how a situation could be good or bad. They do a lot of thinking. They spend a lot of time thinking. Not that extroverts don't, but usually their thought process is a lot more quicker, a lot more. The book calls it impulsive. I don't know if I would give impulsive the word. I don't know if that's a good word for it. I would just say extroverts tend to be a little bit more like decisive, if you will, while introverts are a little bit more indecisive. And like I said, they tend to need time alone, more time to process their thinking. But their uniqueness lies in a way that they perceive the world. So, if you've ever had the chance or the opportunity to speak to an introvert, which there's a lot of introverts that exist in the world, you'll see, like, the conversation, the way the conversation goes, how deep, how thought-provoking introverts can be at times. I consider myself an introvert and an extrovert, so I call myself an ambivert, because I think for me it just depends on the situation or the environment that I'm in. If I'm around people that I'm not too familiar with, I'm more reserved, quiet, and just observant. But if I'm around people that I know, I'm the party. I'm the life of the party. And so yeah, I think it just depends. For me, it just depends on environment. But like I said, extroverts are more outgoing. They enjoy the thrill of rush. They like to work with others, and they typically make quicker decisions than introverts. And I found this interesting. Like, the book talks about how, like, introverts should avoid movies or things like with violence, because it could like provoke emotions and things. And I thought that was interesting, because I definitely can see that, like, in myself sometimes when I'm watching a movie or something, especially if it's like super violent. I can't watch it because it'll just move too much emotions in me, and I'll be thinking about it, and like I can't separate the fact that it's a movie or just a show. Like, for me, it's like, no, this is actually happening, and I can't watch it. So I don't know if you're an introvert and that you also have that dilemma. Definitely leave a comment. Let me know, because I'm curious. Am I the only one that does that? But third takeaway here from reading this book is that being introverted is a personality trait that we should protect as a society. And I say that because I do think that society is doing a better job at incorporating or making spaces that introverts feel safe in. And I think a lot of that has to do with introverts themselves putting themselves in positions to then create more opportunities and safe spaces for other introverts. Like there's this group in Atlanta specifically. It's Controllerize, which is essentially a meetup spot every Monday for creatives, producers, and people who you would consider an introvert. They come to this space, they play games, they listen to music, they eat, they socialize, they do all these things, or they like draw on a table, and they're just allowed to be their introverted self. It's like, it's not about what you look like, how you're dressed, who you're with. It's like, take all the superficial things out of life and just focus on, how do you feel, and being able to have the opportunity to express that in this space. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And so that's like an example of spaces that are being cultivated to cater to more introverted audiences. So with that, I believe that it's important to balance the two. So balancing introverts and extroverts and making sure that they're both equally represented in a space. And I say that because if you don't, you risk as an employer, you risk having a one-track mind, right, about a specific situation. And sometimes, if you have too many introverts, you might lack the decision-making ability or things like that. And I don't want to, there I go, going into the stereotype. So not decision-making ability, but just you might lack the other end of the spectrum that is very well needed to make a sound decision and see things from different angles. But also for anyone who considers himself an introvert, you can still participate in public speaking. The book suggests that all you have to do is prepare, know your audience, and then leverage your unique strengths. So as long as you do those three things, you can for sure go into a public space and speak with confidence and get your point across and be successful. So you should definitely embrace your introverted nature. Don't shy away from it. Don't feel ashamed or like you lack something, because we live in this world that kind of favors extroverts over introverts. And utilize your diversity of thought to your advantage. And even if you have nothing to say, I guess also being an introvert would be like accepting that other people might misjudge you. And, that's just a part of life. And it just comes with, being in situations and places where people just have the free will to think whatever they want. And, that's okay too. But just being okay and accepting that, sometimes you might get mislabeled because you are an introvert, and that's okay. You know who you are, and you know what you can contribute, what you can bring to the table. And so that's what's important. And focusing on that, right? And then also, if you consider yourself an extrovert, understanding that there's this whole other spectrum out there that exists, which I'm sure a lot of people do. But if you don't, taking time out to learn about introverts, the way that they think, the way that they feel, and being able to be a little bit more sensitive to people like that. Everybody doesn't always have something to say all the time. Everybody's not outgoing. Everybody does not want to interact all the time, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that they are antisocial or that they don't have anything to offer the conversation. It just means that they don't want to do that. So you have to respect that. And also, introverts can learn something from extroverts. You can learn you can maybe learn a little bit more charisma, a little bit more let go and just enjoy, not thinking so much all the time, or whatever the case may be. But essentially, learning from each other, and then just honoring the space that each personality trait brings to the table, as opposed to valuing one over the other. Just appreciating them and learning how to live with both and interact with both and create a world where both can thrive. That's essentially what it's all about. So once again, this is Takeaways with Tay. I'm Tay, your host. We'll be back again next Sunday for another book. But yeah, like, comment, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram, like, comment, share on there, and I will see you guys next week. Peace.